You've been living a little bit with a secret, right?
Yes. Well, not so much a secret as it's not something I've ever come out and shared publicly. And I'm involved with a campaign teaming up with Santa Fe US called Diabetes Co-Stars.
And at some point you discovered that you had type 1
and
diabetes.
I have been type 1 diabetes since 2005.
And what kind of symptoms were you having that led to that diagnosis?
Well, it was several years. I didn't feel well, and I would go to the doctor and they'd be like, well, you're fine. Well, maybe it's early menopause. Well, maybe it's, an endocrine imbalance, blah, blah, blah. And I was having extreme thirst, extreme hunger, weight loss, weight gain, just sort of all over the map. My vision started getting really blurred. And it wasn't until I had a simple fasting blood test, and I presented at 640.
Wow,
And,
that's up.
Wow.
yeah. I had a doctor who I went back and I said, well, how come we didn't see this? And he said, well, you only presented around the 150 range a couple of times. And I said, around the 150 range? That's, if you're presenting around the 150 range, you're either pre-diabetic or full-on diabetic.
Well, if you have a fasting blood glucose of 150 and you
There's
have
a
repeated
problem.
fasting blood glucoses of 150, you have diabetes.
Right, absolutely.
But what I find interesting is not so much, your doctors may have heard those symptoms and thought diabetes, but probably would have thought type 2 diabetes because type 1 used to be known as juvenile onset diabetes.
Right.
Type 2 is adult onset. Now we're seeing more type 2 in kids, and
that's why they had to change
they
the
were
name.
able to find out that yours is type 1 where
Right.
you do not make insulin anymore.
No insulin. So it was a huge change for me to sort of walk out of the hospital and they just sort of handed me some syringes and insulin and said, well, here you go. And it was unbelievably overwhelming. I was in the first season of Weeds, and I found myself sort of in my trailer alone just going, well, I'm feeling just completely lost and overwhelmed. And it was a big change for my family and for me. We had to learn a lot.
Cast, did they know you were going through this?
No, I didn't tell anybody for a long time. I was sort of afraid that this was going to be a stigma for me. It felt so overwhelming to me, and I didn't want, if I didn't do a good job, I didn't want them to say, oh, it's because she was just diagnosed and going through this or going through that. I wanted to be really strong. We were literally in episode 3.
But did anyone on set know? Because
No.
one of the big concerns, as you know, is that with diabetes, when you're giving yourself insulin, if you take too much, your blood glucose goes down, you can pass out.
Of course.
If you don't take enough insulin, your blood glucose gets really high, you can go into diabetic ketoacidosis. So you just took that burden on yourself and
Absolutely.